Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Macmillan Education Iberia in Focus for Optimise. My name is Louise Connolly, and I'm the Events Manager at Macmillan Education Iberia. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us this morning. I hope that you're all keeping well. I know that this has been a very difficult year for you all, and I just want to take this opportunity to say well done to you all for doing a tremendous job to keep classes going. Well done. And now I would like to introduce Steve. Welcome, Steve. Good morning. Thank you for being here with us. Good morning. How are you?
And good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to be here.
Great. Thank you. Steve is broadcasting from his office in the north of England. It's great to have him here. It's an hour earlier there. And I just want to explain, well, very briefly, Steve has 25 years experience in ELT as a writer, a consultant, a teacher trainer, an examiner, and a teacher. He's created a number of best-selling multi-level courses, including Optimise, published by Macmillan Education. This is an exam preparation course for teens, and it's the subject of today's event. This event is aimed at teachers who are using the Optimise course. And Steve, with his talk, The Big Day, Preparing Well for English Exams, I'm sure that he has a lot of very practical ideas, advice, activities that we can use with our exam preparation courses. So over to you, Steve.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you everybody for joining me today to talk about exams. Now, just to get us going, I've got a few little... I want to just say that, as Louise said, this is in the context of my series for preparing teenagers for exams called Optimise. And some of the examples that I'm going to show you today come from Optimise. So if you want to know more about the series, as Louise said, get in touch with Macmillan. They'll fill in all the details. I'm just going to show you one or two bits that are relevant to what I want to say today. Let's start off with a few quotes about exams. This is a quote from Fennel Hudson. Exams test your memory. Life tests your learning. Others will test your... What do you think? Others will test your patience. Very true. This is from Winston Churchill. You all know Winston Churchill. Success consists of going from blank to blank without loss of enthusiasm. And it's the same word missing from both places. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Let's see if we can get our students to understand something about that. And here's a good one from the writer Terry Pratchett. Of course, it's very important to be blank when you take an exam. Many worthwhile careers in the street cleansing, fruit picking, and subway guitar playing industries have been founded on a lack of understanding of this simple fact. It's very important to be sober when you take an exam. I doubt that's a problem you have with your teenage students. But what problems do you have with your teenage students? Now, I've got a confession to make. I love exams. I've always loved exams. And the reason I've always loved exams is because I've always done very well on them. And I suspect the same is true for a lot of you. You've got to the position that you are now as teachers because you have passed exams. Now, some of you may share a love of exams with me. Some of you maybe have some anxiety about exams and you don't necessarily love them. But we are the people who have generally done well in exams. And that's not true for a lot of our students, and even for those who do well, there's a lot of anxiety, and they could do better. So I want us throughout this whole talk today, we're going to look at what we can do as teachers, but I want you to bear in mind what it looks like from the point of view of the students, okay, the candidates. Why do students sometimes perform poorly in exams, or why do they sometimes not perform as well as they could in exams? I think there are three key areas that we can work on. The first is preparation. Students sometimes are poorly prepared for the exams, and we'll look together now at what I mean by prepared for the exams. Secondly, poor exam technique. You can get a long way in an exam if you understand how exams are put together and how this particular exam that you're going to take is put together. So that's what I mean by exam technique. We're going to look at a few points connected to that. And then the third issue, I think, is affective issues. Now, by affect, I mean emotions that affect, that influence behavior. So this is particularly things like stress or anxiety. And I want to look at a couple of very practical things that you can do easily in the classroom to help reduce your students' levels of anxiety and improve their performance with surprisingly little work. Some of these things are things that you need to think about for the whole year. But this idea of reducing anxiety, I think there are things you can do right before the exam that can make a big difference. So we need to look at ways of developing effective preparation. We need to develop good exam technique in our students, and we need to lower affect. We need to reduce stress and anxiety. And I want to look at this in the context of 3 time frames. My title is The Big Day, because that's when the exam happens. But of course, we need to be thinking about the exam for the whole academic year, really. So I think there are three time frames that I think we can explore with our students. The first is, what do we need to be doing for the whole of the academic year? What should we be doing as part of our regular teaching that works towards the exam? Secondly, what should we be focusing on in the last few weeks in the run-up to the exam? A period when maybe, rather than introducing new work, we're now starting to think more about revision of work. What should we advise our students to do the night before the exam? And on the big day itself, what advice can we give our students, or what techniques can we give our students to deal with the big day? So we're going to take each of these in turn. So the whole of the academic year. One important area is taking notes. Throughout the year, students either in their course books or in a separate notebook of some kind, or maybe they have a vocabulary book, maybe they have a grammar book, however you arrange their notes taking. Their recording techniques are an important part of ultimately preparing for the exam. Now, the first point I want to make may not apply so much to teenage students, because teenage students tend to handwrite notes rather than typing. I know this is a big issue in higher education, where students go into lectures, sit at laptops, type their notes directly onto a laptop. A lot of research has shown that handwritten notes are far more effective for remembering than typed notes. And I think there are 2 reasons for this. I think the first is that Handwriting notes involves more of the body. It involves you in a physical activity that is quite different from the activity of typing. So I think that helps to get ideas into your memory. And I think the other thing is that handwritten notes are often far more flexible. So you can draw links between ideas. You can position things on the page depending on how important they are or what they're related to. Whereas typed notes tend to be very linear, and they tend to be one row after the next. So if this is an issue in your classroom, I would encourage students to make handwritten notes rather than typed notes. And why do they make typed notes? Why do higher education students make typed notes? Because they think that those notes are then already in a format that they can revise easily later and they're not going to use them. Okay, fine. But if that's the issue, then make handwritten notes and then take a photo of it and store that somewhere. Secondly, we need to look at the format that students make notes in. And I think we need to explore lots of different areas. And one of those is mind maps. So I think there are a few different ways in which you can look at this. And this might not be how students make an initial note of vocabulary, but you might get them to do this with a set of vocabulary a little further down the line as a form of revision. So here's something that I quickly put together about, it's a very simple mind map of emotions. So you can see that we've got angry, happy, excited, and sad. And then I've got various, not synonyms, but words related to that concept. Here's another way of doing it, perhaps for more advanced students, where I've got a kind of vocabulary wheel. So in the middle, I've got the top level concepts of happy, sad. And then as I go out to the next ring, I've got words that fall under that category, like joyful, proud, peaceful. And then getting into the next category, I'm getting a bit more advanced, a bit more sophisticated in my vocabulary. Thirdly, I think that when students are making notes, I want to somehow position those notes in the context of the future exam that they're going to do. So let's look at an example of what I mean by that. This is something from Optimise, and students have a text about you, your subjects, and your future career. Okay, so I'm only showing you the right-hand page here, but there's lots of work on the text on the left-hand page. Students do task 4, which is an exam practice task. And then they go to task 5. Now, particularly at the higher level, at the B2 level, I want students to be able to work out what vocabulary means from the context. But I want to say a word of warning about that. Texts are not generally written to tell you what the word means. In other words, there usually isn't very much context. We very easily say to students, oh, you can work it out from the context. But in fact, we often say that from a position where we already know the meaning. And so the connection between the context and the meaning seems obvious to us. But from a student's point of view, I don't think that is always the case. In fact, I think often that isn't the case. So the point I want to make about working out the meaning from context is it's often enough if the student can work out whether this is a positive word or whether it's a negative word. If it's a noun, what kind of thing do you think is being referred to? Maybe you can't get it exactly because there isn't enough context, but maybe you can get a rough idea. And of course, that is an important exam skill, because when they come to the exam, they need to be able to deal with vocabulary they don't already know. And in that situation, often just understanding, does this word have a generally positive or negative meaning? Often that's enough to answer a question on the text. So here, I want students to read the text, and then they've got task 5, work out what these words mean. Now let's just look at a couple of them more closely and see what I mean about linking it to the exam. So we've got in the text there, you can see there are some words highlighted: fulfilling, suit, daunting, and criteria. Now, the text says that might mean selecting school subjects that will lead to a fulfilling career. Now, hopefully, students can work out from the context that this means something positive, and it means something like happy or satisfying. I want them to recognize that it's not just a word that appears in isolation. It's actually part of a collocation here, a fulfilling career. We generally don't say have a happy career or have a contented career. We say have a fulfilling career. And then notice what I've done on the notes here. I want them to make a note of where this might be useful in the exam. Now that collocation, a fulfilling career, is going to be particularly useful if your students are preparing for Cambridge B2 First, for example. Where might they use the term a fulfilling career? Well, they might use it in speaking, part 1, where students might be asked about their future ambitions. Or they might use it in speaking part 3, where they might be asked about what do you think people think is important in the world of work. If you have to talk about that, then a fulfilling career is a useful collocation to know. Whereas if you look at a word like criteria, at the end of the text it says, unfortunately, not everyone uses the best criteria to base their choices on. Criteria are things we think about to make a decision, and this is much more likely to be useful when you're writing an essay rather than when you're talking about you, your hopes, your ambitions. So as much as I can, when students are learning new vocabulary, I want to put it in the context of where they're going to see it or where they're going to use it in the exam. So apart from recording techniques, of course, you will want to do exam practice with your students. But exam practice can mean many different things. Unfortunately, a lot of people take it to mean that students should do dozens of practice exam tasks over the course of the year by the time they get to the exam itself, by the time they get to the big day. I think that yes, students should do practice, but I think they've got to do practice in the right way. We need to focus on the right skills and the right strategies for the exam tasks. Otherwise, there's a danger that if you give students 20 close passages in a row, one a week, they're just going to make the same mistakes and not learn from doing those close passages, or not learn as much as they should from doing those close passages. So I think the way we approach exam practice has to be targeted. Here's a page from Optimise. This is a listening page, and so as you can see, I'll show you in more detail shortly, but I just want you to see. I know when I show you the whole page that you can't really read it, but I just want to show you the shape of what students are doing here. So in task 4, they're going to do exam practice. But in preparation for that, I'm going to guide them through exam skills, thinking about what is this exam part testing, and exam strategies or exam techniques through Optimize Your Exam. So let's look at this in a little more detail. So in task 1, I've got a warm-up to get students focused on the topic. How easy or difficult do you find it to make new friends? And then you'll see from the exam skill book, the exam skill box, that I want to talk to students about predicting synonyms. Now, when you do exam tasks, a huge number of exam tasks like matching, multiple choice tasks, summary completion tasks, a huge number of those types of exam tasks rely on the idea that the same concept can be expressed in two different ways. And one of those ways appears in the question, and another way of expressing the same idea appears in the listening, or it appears in the reading. A lot of exam tasks revolve around that same central idea. So in this case, I want them to think about synonyms, because often an idea will appear in the question and a synonym for that idea will appear in the listening text or the reading text. In this case, listening. So I talk to students about synonyms, and then in task 2, I want them to match some synonyms to words in the questions. Now, I'm not telling students explicitly that they will hear these synonyms in the listening, but that is actually what happens. So, for example, in 4A, it says difficult, and that is a synonym in number 3 of tough. So students match tough and difficult. They say in pairs so that they can share their vocabulary resources. In 4E, comfortable, that is a synonym of relaxed. Okay, so students then go, I've primed them, even if I haven't told them explicitly, listen for these synonyms. I am implicitly telling them to listen for these synonyms. So I have primed them to do the task. I also want to give them some exam technique guidance. So in Optimise, we've got these boxes, Optimise Your Exam, and what they do is they, in 2 or 3 steps, they give the 2 or 3 most important pieces of exam technique that I want students to be aware of. In this case, underline the keywords in the statements and think about synonyms. The first time you listen, focus on the main idea, and then the second time, try and listen for some of the synonyms that you've predicted. And I'm a big believer in the idea that students should try to predict, even if they are going to be wrong. Of course, they're probably not going to predict exactly the correct synonym, but thinking in that way helps to prepare them for the listening test that they're going to do. Spaced repetition. If any of you ever use apps like Duolingo, then you'll be familiar with the idea of spaced repetition. So the app introduces a set of vocabulary. You practice those at intervals, and the ones you get right appear less often, and the ones you get wrong are repeated, and gradually the space between the repetitions increases, and that helps you to retain stuff in your memory. For us as English teachers, I think there's something we can do in terms of testing here. And by testing, the great benefit of a test is that it prompts students to study and to revisit material that they've done in the classroom. Okay. I mean, there are other benefits, but I think I want to focus on that benefit, that it's a way of getting students to look again at the material that they've done in class. Now, if you do tests like this, where you do a unit from the course book, then you do a unit test, you do unit 2 and you do a unit test, that's fine. But I think the problem with that is that you don't get this concept of spaced repetition. There's no built-in revision, there's no spaced repetition, and the early learning fades very quickly because we're not revisiting it. So this kind of spaced repetition is a better way of approaching testing. Yes, let's do unit tests, but also let's combine units together into tests so that every 2 units we've got a progress check. Maybe every 6 units, if this is a 12-unit course, which the Optimise books are 12 units, then maybe a mid-course check every. So you can see that the material from Unit 1, for example, is now covered 3 times. First of all, after Unit 1, second time after Unit 2, and third time after Unit 6. And then at the end of the year, maybe a 4th time. So as much as we can, whether through, with a course like Optimise, it's built in, but if you're not using Optimise and your course doesn't work like this, then you can try and build your own tests that introduce this idea of spaced repetition. Callbacks. What do I mean by callbacks? These are moments where you bring back into the lesson material or words or grammar or ideas. You bring language back from an earlier point in the course up to this point in the course. And I think there are a few informal techniques. I mean, I guess the tests are more like the formal way of doing it. Callbacks are more like the informal way of doing it on a day-to-day basis. The first is very simple lesson reminders. Start your lesson by referring to what you did last time. Who can tell me what we talked about last Thursday? Let's just refresh our minds and bring something back in. And who can tell me what we talked about the Thursday before that? And now we're going to move on from that idea, and today we're going to talk about this. So I'm putting my students' learning in a kind of structure for them, and I'm also informally just calling back some of the stuff that we've done. Now it might be like I just said, who can tell me what we talked about last time? Who can tell me what this word means? Who can tell me which words we learned last time? So a very quick start to a lesson to just call back to previous lessons. Another couple of techniques. There's a course book race. Okay. So maybe once you're a few units into your course book, you divide your class into 2 teams and you set them things that you want them to find by racing through the course book, flipping through the course book and trying to find the things that you have asked them to find. And it's a kind of game, and the team that finds it first scores a point. So it might be things like you might talk about the content. Who can find me the name of the environmentalist that we read about 3 weeks ago? And so then you set them working through the book to find the name. Or it might be, can you find a phrasal verb that means start a new hobby? Okay. And again, they start racing and they find it. So this is something that you might use every 2-3 units, just as a quick review of what they've done, because I think there's a danger with course books. The danger with course books is that they are linear. And so there's a danger that we can finish Unit 1, think we're done with that, and students think they're done with that, and now we're on to Unit 4, I don't need to think about that. But let's try and find ways of building bridges between what we've done before and what we're doing now. Another technique is this idea of use 2 words. You might adapt it, but this is what I'm going to call it. Use 2 words. When course books are arranged in topics, and there are very good reasons for doing that. It's a fantastic way of arranging the content. It means that it means that a unit can build, so that when students get to the end of a unit, which usually involves some writing, it means that through the reading sections and the listening sections and the speaking sections, the language builds so that everything connects together. And by the time they get to something like the writing, which is usually a very demanding task for them, they've developed language that they can use directly in that writing. But the danger is that we present vocabulary as part of a topic, but we fail to draw links between how that vocabulary is used in other topics. And in fact, once you start to look into vocabulary, a huge amount of it is not really topic-based. It's used across all topics. So I want to find ways of picking up vocabulary from one unit and using it in another unit. Optimise is very good for this because we have, at the back of the student's book, there are word lists. And so this lists the words and the phrasal verbs, word formation, collocations, things like that, that students have encountered in that unit. This reference list is useful because now I can ask students to use it when we're actually doing another unit. So Unit 2 is about places to live, house and home, okay? And the Unit 2 writing topic is that students have to write about what kind of, it's something, I forget the details, but it's something like, what kind of neighborhood would you like to live in, okay? So students are going to write something on what kind of neighborhood they would like to live in. But I'm going to ask them, when you write this, I want you to use 2 words from Unit 1. And they've got this word list to refer to. So if you were going to write about what kind of place you would like to live in, you might use words like curious, or friendly, or generous, or maybe even shy. I'm quite shy, so I would like to live in a neighborhood that has, So use 2 words, maybe use 3 words, depending on how challenging you want to make it for your students. But it's another way of getting them to look back at the material that they have done. Okay, so those are a few things that I think we can do across the whole academic year. What are we going to do in the last few weeks running up to the exam? One thing we will want to do, partly to for us to assess where students are, and partly to prompt students into revising and doing some work, is to do tests or mock exams. Optimise is fantastic for this because we have a test generator. One of the problems you have with this, when you get to this point in the academic year, is that you've done the tests, the progress checks, the mid-course test. You need new tests to retest some of the material that you've already done. So Optimise has a test generator where you can create your own tests involving incorporating the material from different units depending on your needs. You might want to do it, you might want to do a review of Unit 1 on its own, or put Unit 1 and Unit 2 together. So you can generate tests and you can hold mock exams. Now mock exams, of course, one of the aims is you want to get students used to the timing. So at this point, maybe throughout the year, maybe you've had students do exam tasks at home and then come to the classroom with their answers. At this point, it's very useful if you start to focus on the timing and ask them to do these exam tasks, maybe in the classroom with a time limit. The one small point I would make is as I get closer to the exam, and where the mark I give students, I probably start to mark more generously. if I can, with things like writing, as I get closer to the exam, because I want to give students a bit of confidence boost as they go into the exam. I don't want them the week before the exam suddenly getting their worst mark, if I can do anything about it. What is revision? Revision literally means look at again, but just looking at something again isn't particularly useful. I want students to now start to think in a holistic way about the whole exam. And in Optimise, there are two tools that I'm going to use to do that are quite useful. One is the Optimise Your Exam section. This is at the end of the student's book. And we've got a double-page spread on reading, a double-page spread on listening, speaking, and writing. And this is all about a top-level view of the exam. So it's things like match the exam question to the description. So they've got, and then look in the course book to find the units where we've covered this type of exam task. So I want them to think about I want them to revise what kind of exam tasks are you going to see. We've already covered this over the year, but now I want to bring everything together. And then I want them to revise the idea of of exam technique. So in task 2 here, you have to decide how you're going to approach different tasks. So they look at the exam tasks from task 1, exercise 1, and then they have to look to decide which of these is the best way of approaching that task. And again, this is something I might do in pairs so that they can share their ideas. And then we've got Alexandra. She has a reading exam tomorrow and she's a bit nervous. Can you answer her questions? Discuss in pairs or as a group. How much time should I spend on each reading task? Okay, so this is just a fun way, creating a fictional character who's doing what the students are going to do, and ask them to give her advice so that they revise for themselves. Essentially, they are giving themselves advice for going into the reading exam. A similar thing for listening, where again we look at the tasks, we look at typical task types and analyze what kind of technique students should employ. And then this time we've got Yuri, and he's got a listening exam. Can you answer his questions? How many times do I hear each part of the listening exam? Some of these are, you can adapt these to the particular exams that you're going to take, that your students are going to take. The other thing I mentioned is the writing index. This is a very useful reference section which gives students an overview of different writing types. So, you know, when they're going into the writing exam, there's a danger that students can get too occupied by some of the details, like the grammar of the third conditional, and lose sight of some of the big picture things. So I want them to keep in mind the big picture things. And the big picture things include things like layout. What does your piece of writing look like on the page? Because different genres look different. You know, I tell my students, if I hold your piece of writing at arm's length and half close my eyes so that I can't read the words, I should still be able to tell, is this an email? Is it a letter? Is it an essay? Is it a story? Because the shape of them is different. So this writing index is about revising those kind of ideas. So students are given a typical task. Here a typical Cambridge exams task. You've received a letter from your English speaking pen friend. You need to write a letter or an email in response. Here's a letter, and I've got these call out boxes to tell students particular things that I want them to remember. And I also want them to see the shape of that kind of composition. And then some useful phrases that you might use in this kind of letter, not just in this particular task, but in tasks like this. So this is a good revision tool. I want to help students get inside the exam. In other words, try and see it from the examiner's point of view. The more you do that, the more you will understand what the examiner wants from you. So interview practice. Get students to recreate the interview situation for Cambridge exams, where maybe you have two students talking, one student as the interlocutor and another student as the other examiner. And now you don't necessarily want to use the exact criteria of the exam because maybe students aren't qualified. That maybe their English isn't good enough to do the exact job of the examiner. But maybe we ask them to do something like, did the person answer the question? Did they were they fluent? Did they hesitate? Certain things we can ask them to look at, and they can do a mock interview as the examiner. So that gives them some insight into how the examiner views the situation. Quiz writing. They can write tests for each other. They can write gap fill vocabulary items for each other. They can write their own unit tests that you can then ask other students to do. The more you ask them to write their own items, then they begin to understand more how the items are put together. And finally, peer assessment. This is where students might look at each other's writing and think about looking at it from the point of view of the examiner. Again, not necessarily using the exact criteria that the examiner might use, but using criteria like, does this piece of writing fulfill its purpose? Is the meaning clear? So the more we can help students get inside the exam, the better. Expressive writing. I said I was going to show you two very simple techniques that can have a big impact on the stress that students feel on the big day, and this is the first one. When you're in an exam, focusing on exam tasks, your working memory is one of the key resources that you use to focus on the exam task. But it's a limited resource. And anxiety drains some of your working memory, meaning that you've got much less working memory available to focus on the exam tasks. This is why anxiety and stress this is how anxiety and stress affect exam performance. So we need to reduce anxiety. And expressive writing is a very powerful technique for doing that. This comes from a study from 2011, writing about testing worries boosts exam performance in the classroom. Okay, so this is what they do. These researchers did this on maths tests, they did it on biology tests. They didn't specifically do it on language tests, but I'm convinced the same principle applies. So what you can see in this diagram is that on the left, it says pre-test. What they did was they took groups of students and they asked them to do a test. And then later, another test. Now, in order to they wanted to create a situation where the second test was high stakes to reproduce the stress of taking a high stakes exam. Now, how do you do that? What they did was They put students in pairs, and they said that if the marks of both of you improve from the first test to the second test, then you will receive some money. And then we tell the student, your partner's score already improved. So there's now pressure on you, because if you don't do well, you and your partner will both lose out on the monetary reward. They also said that we are videoing the test and your teacher is watching the video. So they created a pressured situation. Right. Now, so they got students to do the first test. And then with the control group, they asked the control group to sit quietly in a room for 10 minutes and do nothing. For the experimental group, they asked them to write for 10 minutes about how they feel about taking an exam. So this is what's called expressive writing. Then the two groups took the second test. And as you can see from this, the dotted line is the control group. The extra pressure of the stressful situation meant that the control group's marks, the control group accuracy, went down. But when students had an opportunity to spend just 10 minutes writing about how they feel about exams, that seemed to remove some of the anxiety and their marks went up. To test whether this is just about writing about the exam or whether you could just do any kind of writing and it would make a difference, they did another study with some other students. This time, as you can see, the control group, which is the large dotted line, the control group went down. The students who did some unrelated writing went down, but students who did some expressive writing, their scores went up. So, and in fact, they went up by a long way. If you look at the paper, they estimated that the difference in scores for the students with the highest anxiety, because this technique makes more of a difference for students with higher anxiety than with low anxiety, which makes sense, because if you've got low anxiety about exams, then reducing that anxiety doesn't make much difference. But if you have high anxiety, then reducing it can make a big difference. And it made a difference between getting a B- and getting a B+. So just a 10-minute intervention of writing about your exam anxiety can make a big difference to your performance. And it's not something that needs to be, in fact, it's probably something that shouldn't be in English. This is maybe a week before the exam. Find 10 minutes of classroom time and ask your students to write about how they feel about taking the exam. And they can do it in L1, because you don't want this. This is not an English test. This is about reducing their anxiety in an English test. So write for 10 minutes, how do you feel about taking the exam? Now, maybe you might do nothing with that. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that students have the chance to write it. You don't need to do anything with it. If you want to, if students want to share how they feel, you can ask them to share their ideas or to read what they've written. But they don't do anything that increases anxiety, because the whole point here is to reduce anxiety. A very powerful technique for those of your students who have high exam anxiety. The night before the exam, what are you going to tell your students to do the night before the exam? They should stay awake until 4 in the morning, revising the third conditional and the present perfect continuous. Not really. What they can usefully do the night before the exam is take a take a holistic view of English. In other words, do something in English that you enjoy just to keep it ticking over in your mind. So maybe, oh, I forgot my have you say. All right, let's go back to the have you say. This is my one idea about my one bit of interactivity. What do you think students should do the night before the exam? So
Okay,
I think,
so
go on, Louise.
yes. Yeah, no, the question is on your screen now. So it's what should students do the night before the exam? And we'll give you a couple of seconds. You can write short answers. And while we're waiting, I just want to say, Steve, I hadn't heard about that idea of expressive writing, but I think it's a really powerful tool. Very simple,
Yes,
and doing it in their own language and not necessarily sharing, because as you say, you don't want to increase their stress levels, but it potentially it has really could have a really positive effect. I'd never heard of it before, but it's such a simple idea that,
yeah,
yeah.
it does. I'm all for. I'm all for. When it comes to things like anxiety, um, how do we do it? It can seem too big. It seems like any intervention that we can make as teachers seems like, well, you're asking me practically to change this child's personality. It can seem like a big thing. And how do we have simple interventions that are effective? And it seems that one is very it's very simple. It takes 10 minutes of classroom time.
Mm.
But it really does have a big effect. It means that students' minds are much more freed up. In a way, it seems that the generalized and the abstract anxiety is made more concrete and more specific, and then put in a particular place. It's put in that piece of writing, and then that frees up my
Exactly.
mind to
Exactly. And
work a bit better in the exam.
exactly. And it's externalizing it. It's sort of kind of like taking it out of you, putting it on paper. Yeah, and
Exactly.
putting that distance. So it's great. Okay, I think we've got some answers. Yes. Talk to some native friends.
That's a good
And
idea. Yeah, I love that.
yeah, from Lily, they should relax and get a good night's sleep before the exam.
I completely
Watch a
agree.
film, watch a film in English. You were talking about something global, something they enjoy.
Yeah.
Relaxation is key. Maybe go for a walk, watch your favorite film again, listen to music and sing. So activities that you enjoy doing.
Very good.
Watch a series in English that you enjoy, play games using English, something that they would enjoy, absolutely. Um, watch some tube videos, yes. Listen to
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah. Yeah,
Great,
absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. So I completely agree with all of those ideas. I mean, I'll just show you I'll show you what I made a note of. Watch a movie in English, read a book in English. If they are going to look at anything in the course book, then it should be these top level things like the optimize your exam section or the writing index. And as somebody said, get a good night's sleep. I'm sure a few of you said this. Get a good night's sleep. Don't stay up late revising. Of course, this is what we say to students. They still stay up till 4 in the morning revising the present perfect continuous, but what can you do? We can only do our best. And then finally, it's the morning of the big day, where it's too late for us to do anything about it. You always see at exams day, you always see that the teachers are really relaxed because they've done their job. There's nothing they can do now. It's the students who are on edge. And in fact, I think that feeling of relaxation is the best thing that you can project. Again, I'm sure you would agree with these ideas. Have a good breakfast. You don't want to be. I mean, and exams typically don't happen just one on one day. Sometimes you have a whole day of exams. Get there in good time. You don't want to be rushed because you're afraid of being late. The next two are difficult. See it as a chance to show what you know. That's how I always viewed exams. I always liked exams because I wanted to show what I knew, you know. But I know that lots of people don't see it like that. But as much as we can, let's try to reframe an exam not as torture, but as an opportunity. And finally, relax. Okay, how? Relax, fine. But I'm going to take an exam. How do I relax? All right, this is my second, the final bit of this talk. This is the second simple technique that I want to introduce to you. You've probably heard of mindfulness. Okay. Now, I actually, for about the last 5 or 6 months, I've actually been trying mindfulness meditation, and I find it very useful. However, with students, I think that mindfulness requires quite a long-term investment of time. And I think most of us working with teenagers and on exam courses, we don't have that kind of time to devote to relaxation techniques. But there is one very simple relaxation technique that you can do once in the classroom. Maybe it takes 5-10 minutes, and it can have a big effect. And it's called anchoring. And we're going to do this together now. Now, I'm going to rely on you to come along with me and do this activity with me. If we were all together in a room, I could see who had their eyes open and who had their eyes closed and who was doing it properly. But you're all sitting at home or at work at your computers. So I'm going to rely on your good faith to come along with me and try this. Louisa's come back into the picture. She's going to do it with me.
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. So the principle of anchoring is that we're going to choose a feeling that we want to anchor. Now, this might be, in terms of exams, it might be a feeling of calm, a peaceful feeling, relaxation, or it might be a feeling of confidence. Okay. I'm going to go for confidence. You choose which you like, relaxation or confidence. And we need to choose a trigger. Now, by a trigger, it's a point usually on your hands that you're going to touch to anchor that feeling to that point. Now, I'll show you an example. I've got an anchor here on my knuckle there. So if I'm about to do a talk in front of 1,000 people or anything, and if at all I feel like, oh, that's a big audience or something like that, then I might just use that anchor there. But another good point might be the knuckle on your thumb, or it might just be your first finger, or just choose a point now that you're going to use as your trigger. All right, now, don't touch it yet. You've chosen, don't touch it, right. Now, you probably find this might be better if you just kind of relax and close your eyes. Think of a time when you felt the feeling that you want to anchor. If your feeling is confidence, think of a time when you felt really confident. You walked into a room and you knew exactly what you were doing, and you felt maybe it was a lesson that went really well and you felt on top of your game. If it's relaxation, think of a time when you felt really relaxed. Maybe you were on the beach on vacation or walking through a forest in springtime and you felt a feeling of peace and calm. Try and visualize that feeling as strongly as you can. And if you can feel it, then just touch the anchor points that you've chosen while you focus on that feeling. Focus on being confident or being relaxed. Try and remember what it felt like that time when you were so relaxed or you felt so confident. Okay, and now stop and open your eyes again. Okay, now we're just going to repeat exactly the same process. Close your eyes and focus as hard as you can on that time when you were confident or relaxed. Try and remember what it felt like, what you were doing. And now touch your trigger to try and anchor that feeling to that trigger. You felt so relaxed that day and peaceful. You felt so confident in your abilities as a teacher after that fantastic lesson. Okay, now, so what you've done, now you can open your eyes. What you've done is you've created an anchor that when you touch that point, it brings back those feelings. So if you just touch that point now, you might feel a slight rush of confidence or a slight feeling of relaxation because it takes you back to that moment. Okay. If you want to reinforce this, then you can do it more and more over time. But simply spending 10 minutes with your students doing this activity will mean that you have said, okay, if you feel anxious in the exam, you've at least now got something to do. You've at least now got a trigger that you can touch to bring back to them that feeling of relaxation or that feeling of confidence. And that can just give them that little edge that they need going into the exam or during the exam. Don't panic, don't panic. At least I've got a technique now to just, for 5 seconds, just touch that point, feel that feeling, and then go back to what you're doing. Okay, excellent. Good. Thank you very much for coming along with that little centering activity. Right, so now I think we're at the point where we can share some questions if you've got any. Over to you, Louise.
Yes. Okay, so if you would like to send in any comments or questions that you have about the different ideas that Steve has put forward today, please do so now. There's a window on your screen. You can write in comments or questions. And while we're waiting, I would just like to thank you, Steve, so much for this very practical talk. I think you've put the exam in a very clear context, and I really like the idea of this time frame, which I, as a teacher, when I was teaching several years ago, and I taught exam classes, and also I examined, but it wasn't something that I always had in mind. I wish I had attended this talk back when I was preparing students, for example, for the first B2 first exam. It was called something else then, but certainly your point about we have a tendency to expose students to a lot of exam questions, but that doesn't necessarily have a positive impact on their performance because we're not focusing in on what it is we're asking students to do, what the test or the task is, and looking inside.
I see some exam. I've at the start of my career, I lived in Greece. And Greece is a country where they love exams. They love pieces of paper. And as I said, I'm very happy with that because I love pieces of paper too. I love exams.
Yes, but not all students do.
Not all students do, no. But in some classes, I was handed a book to teach, which was maybe 20 practice tests.
Wow.
Now I don't think students need to do the same exam task 20 times. I think they need to do it much fewer times, but they need to do it in the right way. And we need to focus on it and analyze it in the right way. You don't pass an exam just by sheer volume of practice tests that you've done.
Yes, absolutely. It's what you do, it's how it's getting inside the task, understanding it,
Yeah.
approaching it in the right way, and then doing,
Yeah.
you know,
I
practice
mean, a lot
tests
of the
later on. No,
a lot of the things that I was saying are about exactly that. They're about understanding how exams work. Try and put
yeah,
yourself in the mind of the examiner. What do they want from you, and how can you give it to
exactly.
them?
Exactly. Okay, we have some comments. For example, I love the expressive writing idea to reduce stress. I will definitely be using it in class. I think the students can share their feelings after this task. Also,
Yeah.
I will be trying anchoring with the students. So these are, yes, I think really, again, I would say I wish I had known about these techniques back when I was preparing classes for exams such as the
And
B2
the
first.
good
And
thing about
really,
them, the good thing about them is they don't demand a large amount of classroom time, 10 minutes
exactly.
each, maybe. And because some of the techniques, some of the kind of mindfulness techniques are spread over more time, and I think they're too
Mm,
demanding for most exam classes. You
mm,
don't have time to spend 5 minutes
no,
every day getting students to meditate,
no,
but
no,
you
no.
can find 10 minutes to do anchoring or to do expressive writing. So
Yes.
I would, yes, I'm very pleased to hear that you're going to try that. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's great. You might, for example, with other mindfulness techniques, you might introduce it and say, you know, as a possible technique for students to use themselves outside of the class. But obviously,
Absolutely.
taking up too much time of classroom time, which is limited. You know,
Oh yeah,
people
yeah,
don't have so much contact hours, but perhaps
yeah,
outside of class, if certain students were interested in techniques, you could refer them to some techniques for them to
yeah.
explore more. But I agree with you, contact time is limited. Um, how how many hours would you use for each unit in the B1 plus or other levels? I mean, do you have any indications to make as to um,
See, now
I
now
mean,
you're
this is
jumping into now
approximate.
you're jumping into the
I
technical
know,
questions. I've
I'm
got to
sorry,
remind you.
I've gone really, yes, but approximate, because obviously it does depend, doesn't it, on your class, the makeup of your class, the students, the number of students you have, and the type of students you have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, when I put together courses, the courses, I think courses these days have become more flexible in terms of timing because they've got so many more components going on.
Yeah.
So when I put together courses, and I create courses that need to work in a lot of different situations.
Hmm.
So usually what we're aiming for something like 80 to 120 hours. We want quite a wide spread of flexibility. And we create that flexibility by, um, there's all kinds of stuff that you can use, but you don't have to use, you know. So I, when people ask me that kind of question, I prefer to look at it from the other point of view. I prefer to think, well, how much time do you have?
Mm.
Given that amount of time, what can you do with a course like Optimize? You know,
Yeah.
um, so that's I find that question a little difficult to answer because it's so dependent on,
Yes.
like you said, Louise, so dependent on circumstances, exactly how you work, the institutional expectations. You know, one of the things that I'm not suggesting you do this with Optimize, but one of the things I learned very early on in in teaching in Greece, where in the beginning of my career, you know, I didn't have the choice of what materials to use, and
Mm.
I was given a course book, and I was told that I must do everything in the course book because the parents are paying for it. The parents have bought the course book, and so they don't want. You can't have the child showing the teacher, well, we did this page, but we didn't do that page. So make sure you do everything in the course book. But I soon realized that doing everything in the course book, if it was stuff I didn't really want to focus on, you can do it very quickly. Okay, this exercise, tick, tick, tick. What answer have you got? B, C, D. Fine. Now we've done that. Now I can do something more creative that I want to do that isn't in the course book. So that I'm talking about with course books that I didn't think were very good. So I think it's difficult for me to answer that because there are so many different ways of working with material.
Exactly.
If I was there in person, then we could kind of look at what time the person who asked the question has, and I could make suggestions. But yeah,
yes,
I mean,
they've
there's a rough
actually
rule.
they've sent in. I think it's the same person. They say that they have 3 hours a week,
Okay.
and they have to do it in over 2 years.
3 hours a week over how many? 30 hours? No, how many weeks?
I don't know how many. Well, it's over 2 years, but it would be 9 months. It would say September to June or the
I mean,
end of May.
what's the academic year in Spain? Is that like 28 weeks or 30 weeks?
It's approximately, I think, about 28 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that would give you enough time to do everything in Optimise and to use some of the supplementary stuff that goes along with it. Do all the workbook and so I think that would work very well. I mean, really, however you work, to my mind, the book is divided into lessons. So the first double-page spread of reading is a lesson. And then the grammar and vocabulary is probably a lesson. That in some situations that might be 2 lessons. It depends exactly how you approach it, really. And then the listening and the grammar, that's probably a lesson, again, possibly 2. The speaking and language in use, that's a lesson. And then the writing is probably going to be 1 lesson. So 6 lessons for a unit, something like that, I would guess. But again, it depends on exactly how you work. But
Exactly.
I hope that gives you some idea of. I hope that gives you some
Yes.
idea of the fact that I can't really answer the question.
And also it depends on whether, for example, I had classes in the past where I had some students who were going to sit the exam and some who weren't. So you have to find a balance there as well. So it really does depend on, it's not just the number of hours, it's not just the time you have, but also the makeup of your students, I think, in the class.
Yeah,
not all classes are just exam preparation classes. We may have a mix of students in there as well. Okay, we've got some other comments and questions. I would like to know some tips about how students can improve their writing when they take the exam. Most of them get used to making many mistakes. Spelling and grammar mistakes are the most common ones. So any tips about how to improve writing in terms of errors, well, mistakes?
Yeah. Okay. One thing is, and this is a similar point, I think, to what I was making about working memory and the demands on that as a resource when you're doing exams, and anxiety competes for the resources with the exam tasks. I think a similar thing applies to writing tasks, but in this case, I think it's about ideas and language to express those ideas, both competing for mental resources. I never want ideas, or rather the lack of ideas or struggling for ideas, to get in the way of language. I will give my students ideas. If they've got their own ideas, fantastic. If they haven't, I don't care. I'll give you ideas. Okay. So, for example, students might have to do a story task. So I think the key to this is the preparation that you do. So students might have to do a story task, and the story task might say something like, Write a story to appear in an international teenage magazine and start with this sentence. Judy couldn't believe it when she opened the envelope. Okay. Now, some students will go away and they will love coming up with their own ideas. Some students will stare at a blank page and they will just think, I don't know what to do. So at the end of the lesson, I'm going to ask my students to write that for homework. Right? So at the end of the lesson, before I ask them, literally for the last 5 minutes, I go around the class and I say, okay, who's Judy? Student tells me she's a girl who's, how old is she? 12. Okay, so I write that on the board somehow. She's a girl, 12. Where does she live? Madrid. Okay, Madrid. Where's the envelope from? It's from a competition. Okay, what kind of competition? So together, very quickly, I build up one possible story. And I tell my students, you can use this, or you can use your own ideas. I don't mind. But don't tell me I didn't have any ideas, because we've all just created one idea together, and you can use that. So that means that, and this applies to all the other genres, like an essay, I will run through one possible answer structure for the essay. You don't have to use that, but if you want to, it's there. So you can't tell me I didn't have any ideas. So then when they come to write, it means that they can focus on the language much more without having to sit there chewing their pen thinking, what do I really think about this issue? If they're the kind of students who have opinions and ideas, I want to hear them. But really, learning English is not, I'm not judging you on your ability to think of ideas. I'm judging you, well, I try not to judge you, but you are ultimately being assessed on your ability to put ideas into English. It doesn't really matter whether those are your ideas or not. So I think one thing is always make sure that before students write, always make sure that they are prepared with ideas, because I think that gives them more, it means that they're free then to focus more on the language.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, I mean, in Optimise, I've already mentioned, there are some specific tools, like there's the writing index where they can see how the writing is put together. And on top of that, I think it's useful to get students to think about writing in terms of purpose and effect on the reader, and to try and see it not as a matter of producing 150 words because my teacher has asked me to do that, but see it as we're pretending that this is something that's going to appear in a magazine. So who's going to read it? What do they expect? How are you going to communicate with them? What do you want to tell them? So more of those kind of genre communication theory kind of questions.
And not get bogged down in being accurate all the time. Yes. Because at the end of the day, it is a communicative form, you know, it's in a writing or a speaking, you're communicating ideas, and you're being judged on how effective you are, not necessarily that you are word perfect or grammatically perfect, but rather, can I understand this?
Yeah, it's worth remembering that in exams, grammatical accuracy or vocabulary accuracy is only part of what students are being assessed on. I've got one more practical thing though. You probably share with me the experience of asking students, okay, you've got a class of, let's say, 30 students. You ask them to write an email to a website, and you talk about it for the whole lesson, and then they go home and you ask them to write an email for a website. Monday morning, you get 27 emails one story, one essay, one article, and it's like some of the things are a waste of your time marking because it's not close enough to what you've asked them to do. All right. Or even if they've written an email, they've written it to the wrong person, or it's what I've started to include in all the books that I write at the end of the writing section. And sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's smaller, but I've got one here. I'll just kind of show you that. It's a checklist. Okay. So I want my students, their work should meet at least a minimum standard before it's worth my while looking at it. So for this particular task, this is where students are asked to write. This is from B1. So on the Cambridge B1 exam, the B1 preliminary, they have to write a short message. Okay. So that's what this lesson is all about, preparing to write a short message. And the checklist, before they give me their piece of writing, I want them to tick this checklist. And the checklist says, I've included information about the 3 points. There are 3 points in the prompt. If they can't check this, if they can't tick that, there's no point me saying, oh, you've missed out the information. You should check that before you even give it to me. I've followed my plan. I've used opinion phrases. I've kept within the word limit. I've checked my spelling and grammar. So these kind of checklists that students do when they've finished their writing, but before they give it to you, it helps to focus them on things that you think are practical about for improving their writing. And it just makes, if you don't do something like that, then no matter how much you tell students to check it, they will just stop, close it, turn on the PlayStation and go and do something else. Yes. So I think these are a powerful practical tool for just making sure that students pause and look at 1 or 2 things before they hand it over to you. And so the standard goes up because of that.
Excellent. One last comment, an actual question. The person says, I have some students who have confidence issues during the speaking exam. Do you have any ideas to combat this problem? Some students panic and then are unable to say anything. So we're talking about the speaking here. I imagine that many of the ideas that you've put forward today are also relevant, but would you like to comment on any specific techniques?
Sure. One thing I would advise is when people are practicing speaking, let them do it in pairs, so that I want to draw a distinction between doing it as an open class and doing it in pairs, because a lot of reluctance to talk comes from performing in front of everybody in the class. Now, when you put a class of students into pairs and you have them all quietly doing the task at the same time, then for a lot of students, they feel safer in that situation just talking to one person than they do having to speak in front of the whole class. So one thing you can do is use more pair work and group work, pair work in particular for this kind of speaking. Because I think it creates a safer space for making mistakes, really, for talking. I guess another thing is to reassure students that it doesn't have to be you. In other words, some students feel reluctant to talk because, course books might say something like, describe where you live. Now, maybe you don't live in a great neighborhood. Maybe you don't live in a great house. Maybe you're not confident because, maybe you're a little bit embarrassed about your home life for some reason. I don't know, but reassure students, make it up. Doesn't have to be you. Why don't you tell me that you live in a mansion and you've got servants and you've got a yacht? It's not important. I want to hear you using language. It doesn't have to be about you. Now, some students love talking about themselves, but if they want to play a character, then fine. That's as long as I'm getting them to do some stuff in English. So
Yes.
I think I would say those.
Yes. And what about, I mean, for example, I'm just thinking of in an exam situation, you're doing the speaking exam, and sometimes you can go blank or you can forget the question. You know, so techniques about, you know, asking the examiner to repeat the question, to give yourself the opportunity. I mean, you know, the kind of things that you would do in real life. Okay, it's an
Yeah,
exam situation, but in real life, how often have we all forgotten what the question has been somebody has asked?
yeah,
How easy
absolutely.
it is to go off on a tangent and not just in real life. I'm not talking about exams, but in real life and not really answer the question. It's actually a very human quality, actually, I would say. It's so easy
Yeah,
to so teaching or helping them, yeah, to get to use that technique. Could you repeat the question, please? Obviously, we don't want them to ask that 10 times during the speaking test, because that would
so
show that
I think
they've.
that's a very good point, because I think that so much of education, so much of the students' time in the classroom is, and not just in their English classroom, but in all their classrooms, so much of the time is being asked a question, and then they have to provide the answer. And I don't know is not usually a valid answer in the eyes of a lot of the teachers. Right? Now,
Yeah,
when you come to the speaking test in an exam, students need to be reassured that it's not about correct answers, and saying I don't know is perfectly fine. The thing that matters is how you say I don't know. If the examiner asks you a question like, what's a good question? Does the use of computers, does artificial
yeah,
intelligence threaten people's jobs? Now, one candidate might say, I don't know, and stop. Okay.
yeah,
Now, clearly, that's not what we want from candidates. Another candidate might say, well, I don't really know. Do you know, it's not something I've thought about very much. I suppose that, and then maybe go on to say something. We need to be encouraging our students that, particularly in it, the examiner is not judging you on your answer to the question. They're not judging you on your knowledge. They're not judging you on the content so much. They're judging you on how you put it together in English.
yeah,
Right?
yes, yes. No,
So
very
I
good
think
point.
I think the more we can get students to understand that, I think that they can.
It helps their confidence. Well, it's giving
I
them the
think
language as well to answer that idea of, well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure, but
yes. No.
you know
Yes. I'm.
that sort of language that kind of leads one into the question, and then one gives an answer. Is perhaps not a very original answer, but that's not the point, as you say. It's not
No.
about being original. It's about
Yeah. And
how do I approach it?
we need to teach students these kind of phrases for just giving themselves a few seconds to think, like, well, I've never thought about that, but I imagine, okay, I've bought myself there maybe 4 seconds for my ideas to just
Exactly.
something to click into place.
Exactly. And that actually relates to a comment from somebody. Again, the students the person says are in pairs. However, I have shy students who have problems with pausing for too long. So it's kind of this idea of fillers, perhaps here, which is so important
Fillers.
in mhm,
Yeah, I think another
buying
thing
time.
is, a certain amount of pausing obviously is fine. A certain amount of pausing is perfectly natural while you think for
Yes.
ideas. And when you look at exam criteria, they often say that, um, you know, pausing for ideas is perfectly understandable. It's when you pause for language too much that it can become a
Yes.
problem. I think there are things like games you can play to encourage fluency, you know, where maybe give students a topic and ask them to talk for 15 seconds without stopping about your ideal pet. If students are a bit more advanced, talk for 30 seconds without stopping about what I look for in a friend, whatever it is. Little games like, and you can turn it into a game where if they pause for too long, they, again, maybe in pairs rather than in open class, but if they pause too long, then maybe they lose a point or something. You can turn it into a game. But I think little exercises like that can work on fluency to some extent.
Yes. And giving the language for the fillers as well. No, that kind of functional language that helps one to buy time, to put things together, to make connections, all of that. And having that perhaps available around the room as well as a reference, and in those activities that you say, making it explicit. Now use this. See if you can give them, I don't know, you need to use 2 of these expressions or 3, some kind of challenge in a less stressful environment, because obviously on the day of the exam, you can't just suddenly produce that from nowhere. So there needs to be that work, as you say, throughout the academic year.
And I think I would also to make that exam situation familiar, reproduce it during the year. Don't just have students talking in pairs all years and then they go into this exam situation and it's strange. Set up. I mean, what I have done is have Saturday morning interviews where students have different times to come in, and they've got their slot where we do a practice. They come in pairs and we do a practice exam interview where because the problem in the classroom is you can't do that with 2 students. It's difficult to do that with 2 students when you've got 28 other students who need to be doing something. I mean, you can do it, but it's demanding. But you might be able to. You might be able to do it.
You might be able to do it if you gave the other students a task to do, or yes, but I think that's a good idea as well. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve. Really, this has been so practical, and so it's been wonderful to have your insights as a course writer, as one of the writers of this course, but also your experience as a teacher, your experience as a teacher trainer, as an examiner, your insights into the exam, what's being tested, and what are the best ways to approach that and help students prepare for the big day, as we say. So fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's always
it's been a real pleasure.
I'm looking forward to everything being open again, so I can come to Spain and actually see everybody in person. I'm getting a bit tired of talking into a camera in my office.
I know. It does feel like talking into a void, doesn't it? But hopefully, yes, sooner rather than later, we'll be together again in a face-to-face situation in Madrid or in Barcelona or somewhere else, and we can have this discussion as well, which is lovely in a face-to-face situation where you can take questions from the floor and share. I think that's great. But we have shared today a lot, I think.
Thank you to everybody for coming along.
Absolutely. Thank you to everybody. Well, thank you. Thank you once again, Steve. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and hopefully we'll see you again soon, face to face. And good day, everybody. Good rest of the week. And really, I wish you all the best possible finish to what has been a very challenging course this year, but you've done a great job, and I'm sure students and parents alike are really appreciative of the tremendous work that you've all been doing this year. So see you soon. Bye.
Bye for now.